My mother hit my 5-year-old son with her stiletto heel. The crack of the heel against his shoulder, his scream, blood rushing in my ears as I watched her stand over him. Shoe still raised, ready to strike again. Leo crumpled to the floor, sobbing. She looked at me and smiled. That smile told me everything I needed to know. This woman who gave birth to me had just assaulted my child, and she felt justified. In that split second, 32 years of manipulation, control, and abuse crystallized into one simple truth. I had to choose. My mother or my son. There was no middle ground anymore. If this story resonates with you, if you have ever felt trapped in a toxic relationship with someone who was supposed to love you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps me share these stories of survival and hope. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to make the impossible choice between family loyalty and your own well-being? Now let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began. 6 months before that terrible day, I thought I had everything under control. I was 32 years old, a freelance graphic designer working from home, raising Leo as a single mother after his father walked out when I was 7 months pregnant. My modest townhouse in suburban Connecticut was my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without feeling my mother's critical eyes boring into my back. But Eleanor had always been a storm that refused to stay contained. Growing up, I learned early that love in my mother's world came with conditions and price tags. She was beautiful, successful, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. My father left when I was 12, and I never blamed him. Eleanor collected people like trophies, displaying them when they served her purposes and discarding them when they did not. I was her project, her creation, meant to reflect her glory. Every B grade was a personal insult. Every friend I made was subjected to her inspection and usually found wanting. Every dream I harbored that did not align with her vision was crushed with surgical precision disguised as maternal concern. I spent my teenage years trying to be the daughter she wanted. I studied what she demanded, dated who she approved of, even started pre-law at Yale because she decided I would be a lawyer like her late father. But at 19, I cracked. I switched my major to fine arts, and Eleanor responded by cutting off my tuition. She told everyone who would listen that I was throwing my life away, that I was ungrateful and foolish. I worked 3 jobs to finish my degree at a state school, and when I graduated, she did not come. She sent a card that said, "Hope you enjoy your poverty." For years after that, we maintained a cold distance. I built my freelance business slowly, found my own path, and convinced myself I had escaped her gravitational pull. Then I got pregnant. I was in a relationship with Marcus, a fellow designer who seemed kind and stable. When I told him about the baby, he stayed just long enough to make me believe he would be there, then vanished like morning mist. I was devastated, terrified, and utterly alone. That was when Eleanor swooped back in. She appeared at my apartment door with groceries, sympathy, and solutions. She helped me find the townhouse with a low-interest loan she co-signed. She bought furniture for the nursery. She held my hand during the ultrasound where we learned I was having a boy. I was so desperate for her support, so willing to believe she had changed, that I ignored the warning signs. The way she made decisions about my pregnancy without asking me first, the subtle criticisms wrapped in concern, the expectation that I would be grateful, endlessly grateful, for her generosity. After Leo was born, things escalated slowly. Eleanor visited constantly, always unannounced. She had strong opinions about everything from breastfeeding to sleep training, and she expressed those opinions as if they were commandments. When I tried to set boundaries, she would remind me of everything she had done for me, how much money she had spent, how ungrateful I was being. She started buying Leo expensive gifts and clothes, things I could never afford, and would make sure he knew they came from Grandma Eleanor, not his poor struggling mother. The worst part was Leo himself. He was such a sweet, sensitive child, eager to please everyone. When Eleanor was around, I watched him transform from my giggly, confident boy into a nervous, hyper-aware version of himself. He learned to walk on eggshells around her, just as I had. She demanded he call her Grandma Eleanor with a specific tone of reverence. She corrected his manners constantly. She compared him to other children, always finding him lacking in some small way. I told myself I was managing it. I told myself that having a grandmother in his life, even a difficult one, was better than having no family at all. I convinced myself that the financial help she provided for things like Leo's preschool and his doctor visits was worth the emotional cost. I was wrong. The cracks in this terrible arrangement started showing about 8 months before the shoe incident. Eleanor began showing up at Leo's preschool, signing him out early without telling me, taking him on outings she claimed were educational. The first time it happened, I got a call from the school asking why my mother had picked up Leo an hour early. I had no idea what they were talking about. When I confronted Eleanor, she laughed it off, saying she wanted to take her grandson to the Natural History Museum and did not think I would mind. But her eyes held a challenge, a dare for me to make a scene. I started getting comments from other parents at preschool, vague observations about how lucky I was to have such an involved mother. How Eleanor had mentioned that raising Leo as a single mother must be so hard for me. The subtext was clear. Eleanor was crafting a narrative in which I was struggling and incompetent, and she was the savior stepping in to rescue her grandson from my inadequacy. I tried to address it directly. I invited her to coffee at a neutral location, a cafe downtown where I hoped the public setting would keep things civil. I practiced what I would say for days. I even made notes. When we sat down with our lattes, I took a deep breath and started with something I thought was reasonable. Mom, I really appreciate everything you have done for us, but I need you to check with me before taking Leo out of school. It scares me when I do not know where he is. Her smile was ice-wrapped in velvet. It scares you, Sarah. I am his grandmother. Do you really think I would harm him? This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior that worries me. You are so anxious, so controlling. Leo needs to learn that there are other adults in his life who love him, not just his neurotic mother. Every attempt I made to set a boundary was met with this same strategy. She would twist my words, make me the problem, and remind me of my dependence on her. When I suggested she call before visiting, she accused me of trying to cut her out of Leo's life. When I asked her not to criticize my parenting in front of Leo, she claimed she was only trying to help me be a better mother. When I finally told her she could not take Leo anywhere without my explicit permission, she stopped speaking to me for 2 weeks, then showed up with an expensive new bike for Leo and acted as if nothing had happened. The bike incident was particularly manipulative. Leo was thrilled. Of course, what 5-year-old would not be excited about a shiny red bike with training wheels? But Eleanor made sure to tell him, "Grandma Eleanor bought this for you because your mommy said she could not afford it." I had actually been saving up to buy him a bike for his birthday the next month. Eleanor knew this because I had mentioned it. She deliberately undercut me, making me look like the inferior provider while positioning herself as the generous benefactor. I swallowed my anger and thanked her through gritted teeth. Leo watched our interaction with those big, worried eyes that broke my heart. Even at 5, he could sense the tension, the unspoken warfare happening above his head. Things came to a head about 3 weeks before the shoe incident. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, one of those beautiful early autumn days when the leaves were just beginning to turn. I was working on a logo design for a new client, a deadline project that I desperately needed to finish. Leo was playing quietly with his cars on the rug beside my desk, making soft vroom vroom sounds that normally made me smile. Then Eleanor walked in. She had a key. I had given it to her for emergencies, back when I still believed our relationship could be repaired. She used it as if my home was an extension of hers, arriving whenever she pleased. That day, she swept in wearing an expensive cream-colored suit, her hair perfectly styled, carrying shopping bags from Nordstrom. I looked up from my computer, startled. "Hi, Mom. I did not know you were coming over today. I do not need an appointment to see my grandson," she replied, her tone making it clear that my statement was offensive. Then she turned to Leo, who had looked up from his cars. "Come here and give Grandma Eleanor a proper greeting." Leo scrambled to his feet, but he was 5 and excited, and he just ran to her and said, "Hi," in his cheerful little voice. Eleanor's expression hardened. "That is not how we greet our elders. Young man, you say, 'Hello, Grandma Eleanor.'" Properly. With respect, Leo's face fell. He tried again, his voice smaller now. "Hello, Grandma Eleanor." "Better." Eleanor sniffed. though your posture is terrible. Stand up straight. How many times must I tell you? I felt my stomach clench. Mom. He is 5. He was just excited to see you. She turned her laser focus on me. And that is precisely the problem. Sarah, you excuse every little thing. You do not teach him discipline or manners. Do you know what the other children at his preschool must think of him? The other children love Leo, I said, trying to keep my voice level. His teacher says he is one of the kindest kids in the class. Eleanor laughed. A brittle sound. Kind. How quaint. Kindness does not get you into the right elementary school. Kindness does not prepare him for the real world. But I suppose you would not understand that, would you? You were always too soft. I felt the old familiar shame creeping in, the sense that I was somehow fundamentally inadequate. But then I looked at Leo, and I saw that he had retreated back to his cars, his shoulders hunched, his earlier joy completely extinguished. In that moment, I saw myself at his age, trying to be small enough, good enough, to avoid my mother's criticism. Mom, I think you should go, I said quietly. I have a deadline to meet. And Leo and I were having a nice afternoon. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You are dismissing me, after I drove all this way to bring Leo presents, after everything I have done for you. I did not ask you to come, I replied, and I could hear my voice shaking slightly. And I would appreciate it if you would call before visiting in the future. What happened next is seared into my memory. Eleanor's face transformed. The mask of civilization slipped, revealing something cold and furious beneath. She threw the shopping bags on the floor and stalked toward me. You ungrateful little bitch, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I saved you. I gave you this house. I paid for Leo's preschool. I have done everything for you. And this is how you repay me. By telling me I am not welcome in your home. Leo started crying. Soft, frightened sounds that made my heart break. I stood up, putting myself between my mother and my son. Get out, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Right now? Get out of my house. Eleanor stared at me for a long moment, and I genuinely thought she might hit me. Then she smiled, and somehow that was worse than the anger. Fine, she said sweetly, but remember this. Sarah, you need me far more than I need you. When your money runs out, when your little clients dry up, when Leo needs things you cannot provide, you will come crawling back. And I might not be so forgiving next time. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I immediately went to Leo and held him, feeling him tremble against me. It is okay. Baby. It is okay. Mommy is here. But it was not okay. I knew it was not okay. That night, after I put Leo to bed, I sat at my kitchen table and really looked at my financial situation. Eleanor was right about one thing. I was barely making ends meet. The freelance work was inconsistent. The rent on the townhouse was manageable only because Eleanor had co-signed and negotiated a lower rate with the landlord, one of her golf club friends. Leo's preschool tuition was hefty, and while I paid half, Eleanor covered the rest. I had about $3,000 in savings, which would last maybe 6 weeks if I lost all my clients. I was trapped, and Eleanor knew it. For the next 3 weeks, Eleanor went silent. No visits. No calls. No texts. It was the longest we had gone without contact since Leo was born. Part of me was relieved. Leo returned to his normal happy self without her looming presence. We had lovely quiet evenings together, reading books and drawing pictures. But another part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop. If you will pardon the terrible irony of that phrase, it dropped on a Friday afternoon in October. I was back at my desk, working on revisions for the logo client, with Leo playing beside me again. We had settled into a comfortable routine. I had soft music playing, and I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee when I heard the key in the lock. Eleanor walked in without knocking, without calling, without any warning whatsoever. She looked different somehow, more tightly wound, her movements sharp and aggressive. She was wearing a tailored black dress, and those shoes, the ones that would later become weapons. Leo looked up, and I saw him tense immediately. Hi, Grandma Eleanor, he said cautiously. She ignored him completely, and turned to me. We need to talk. Mom, this is not a good time. I am working and I do not care about your little projects. She snapped. This is important. I have been consulting with my lawyer. My blood ran cold. Your lawyer. About what? About my grandson's welfare. You have proven yourself to be unstable. Sarah, you threw me out of your home. You have been isolating Leo from his family. I have documentation of your erratic behavior, your financial instability, your inability to properly care for a child. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you threatening to sue me for custody? I am exploring my options as a concerned grandmother. The courts take these matters very seriously. A single mother with no family support, barely scraping by financially. Emotionally volatile. It does not look good. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Get out. I managed to say, get out right now, not until you understand something. You cannot cut me out. I have rights. I have invested too much in that boy to be cast aside because you have decided to have one of your episodes. I am not having an episode. I am setting boundaries, which is something I should have done years ago. Eleanor laughed. That awful brittle sound. Boundaries. How very therapeutic of you. Did you read that in one of your self-help books? Let me tell you about reality. Sarah, you are nothing without me. You have always been nothing without me. And that child needs a stable influence in his life. Someone who can actually provide for him. I was shaking with rage and fear, but I made myself stay calm. You need to leave now, or I am calling the police. Go ahead, she said. Call them. Tell them your own mother came to visit her grandson. See how that works out for you. That was when Leo, my sweet, sensitive boy who had been sitting frozen during this entire exchange, got up from the floor and walked toward us. He looked up at Eleanor with his big brown eyes and said in his small voice, Please do not yell at Mommy. You are making her sad. Eleanor's attention snapped to him like a predator focusing on prey. What did you say to me? Leo backed up a step, but he repeated it, his voice wavering. Please do not yell. Mommy does not like it. I moved a step between them. But Eleanor was faster. She grabbed Leo's arm, not hard enough to leave a visible bruise, but firmly enough to make him wince. You do not speak to me that way. You do not tell me what to do. Do you understand me? I am your grandmother, and you will show me respect. Let him go, I said, my voice deadly quiet. She ignored me, tightening her grip on Leo's arm. Your mother has been teaching you terrible manners. She has been filling your head with disrespectful ideas, but I will not tolerate it. Do you hear me? I will not. Leo started crying, trying to pull away from her. Mommy, he sobbed. That was when Eleanor slapped him across the face. It was not hard. Not hard enough to leave a mark. But it was deliberate and cruel. Leo's crying intensified, and something inside me snapped. I grabbed Leo away from her and pushed myself between them. Do not ever touch my son again, I said, and I did not recognize my own voice. Get out of my house right now. How dare you? Eleanor breathed, her face flushing with rage. How dare you speak to me that way? Get out. You cannot throw me out. I have every right to. I will call the police. I will file a restraining order. I will do whatever it takes to protect my child from you. Get out. Eleanor stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to find an angle, a way to regain control. Then her eyes landed on Leo, and something shifted in her expression. Fine, she said, but you will regret this. She turned to leave, but then she stopped and looked back at Leo, who was clinging to me and crying into my shirt. You know what your problem is? Little boy, you are just like your mother. Weak, pathetic, and you know what happens to weak people. They end up alone and miserable. Then she reached down, slipped off her right shoe, that expensive black stiletto with the pointed heel, and before I could process what was happening, she swung it at Leo. The heel connected with his small shoulder with a sickening crack. Leo's scream was unlike anything I had ever heard from him. Pure pain and terror. He crumpled against me, and I felt his whole body shaking. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Eleanor's face, not shocked or horrified by what she had done, but satisfied. I saw the shoe in her hand, that instrument of violence, I saw Leo's tears and the red mark already forming on his shoulder where the heel had struck. Something broke open inside me. Something that had been building for 32 years. I picked up Leo, cradling him against my chest, and I screamed at Eleanor in a voice I did not know I possessed. Get out! Get out right now, or I swear to God I will make you regret the day you gave birth to me. Eleanor actually smiled. Too late for that. Dear, I already do. She walked out, taking her time, putting her shoe back on with deliberate slowness, making sure I understood that she was leaving, because she chose to, not because I had ordered her to. The door closed behind her, and I heard her heels clicking down the walkway, each step like a nail being driven into a coffin. I sank to the floor with Leo, rocking him, checking his shoulder, whispering apologies and reassurances that I am not sure either of us believed. His crying eventually subsided into hiccuping sobs, and then he looked up at me with those devastated eyes and asked the question that destroyed me. Why does Grandma Eleanor hate us? Mommy, I did not have an answer. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that some people are incapable of love? That family can be the source of your deepest wounds. That sometimes the person who gave you life is the person you most need to escape. I held him until he fell asleep in my arms, exhausted from crying. Then I carefully carried him to his bed, tucked him in, and sat watching him breathe for what felt like hours. His shoulder had an angry red mark that would probably bruise. My beautiful, innocent boy, marked by my mother's cruelty. I went downstairs and did something I had never done before. I took out my phone and photographed the mark on Leo's shoulder. Then I sat down and wrote out everything that had happened. Every detail I could remember, with timestamps. I saved Eleanor's text messages, her voicemails, every piece of documentation I could find of her behavior. I was building a case, though I did not fully realize it yet. Then I called David. David Chen had been my friend since college. One of the few people from my old life who had stuck around when I switched majors and lost Eleanor's approval. He had gone to law school, passed the bar, and now worked at a small family law practice in Hartford. We had stayed in touch over the years, meeting for coffee every few months, and I knew he had always suspected something was wrong with my mother. He answered on the third ring. Sarah, it is almost midnight. Are you okay? I need help, I said, and then I started crying. I told him everything, the whole sordid story tumbling out between sobs. He listened without interrupting, and when I finally ran out of words, there was a long silence. Sarah, he said finally, his voice gentle but firm, I need you to take Leo to urgent care first thing tomorrow morning. Get that shoulder documented by a medical professional. Then I need you to come to my office. Bring all the documentation you can find. Every text, every email, every voicemail. Can you do that? Yes, I whispered. And Sarah, you did the right thing. I know it does not feel like it right now. But you protected your son. That took courage. I did not feel courageous. I felt terrified. But I did what David asked. The next morning, I took Leo to urgent care, claiming he had been hurt in an altercation I needed documented for legal purposes. The doctor who examined him was kind and professional, taking photos and notes. Leo was quiet during the examination, withdrawn in a way that scared me. Afterward, I drove to David's office, a modest space in a converted Victorian house near downtown Hartford. David had cleared his morning schedule for us. He gave Leo some paper and crayons to keep him occupied in the waiting room. And then he sat down with me in his office and went through everything methodically. Your mother assaulted your son, he said bluntly. That is a crime, but more importantly, for our purposes, it is grounds for a restraining order. I am going to help you file for an emergency order of protection today. Then we are going to prepare for what comes next. What comes next, I asked, though I already knew. She is going to fight back. Based on what you have told me about her personality and her resources, she is going to try to make this about you being an unfit mother. She is going to use your financial dependence on her, your status as a single parent. Anything she can twist into evidence of instability. Can she win? Can she take Leo from me? David looked at me seriously. Not if I have anything to say about it. But I will not lie to you. Sarah, these cases can get ugly. Grandparents' rights are a real thing in Connecticut. And if she has a good lawyer, which I am sure she does, she will exploit every angle. You need to be prepared for a fight. I am prepared, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. I will do whatever it takes to keep my son safe. We spent the next 3 hours going through documentation, building a timeline, discussing strategy. David explained that Eleanor could potentially sue for visitation rights, or even try to claim that I was an unfit parent and seek custody. The thought made me physically ill. But David was pragmatic about our chances. You have several things in your favor. First, you are the biological parent, with sole legal custody. Second, we have medical documentation of her assault on Leo. Third, from what you have told me, we can likely find witnesses to her erratic and controlling behavior. Fourth, and this is important, you have a record of trying to maintain a relationship with her, despite her behavior. This is not about alienation. This is about protection. Over the next week, things escalated exactly as David had predicted. The emergency restraining order was granted, prohibiting Eleanor from contacting me or Leo or coming within 500 feet of our home or Leo's preschool. I had the locks changed and installed a security camera at my front door. I told Leo's preschool teacher, Mrs. Morrison, about the situation, providing her with copies of the restraining order and strict instructions that only I was authorized to pick up Leo. Mrs. Morrison was sympathetic and supportive. She had actually witnessed some of Eleanor's behavior during previous pickup times and was willing to provide a statement if needed. I am so sorry you are going through this, she said, but for what it is worth, Leo has been much happier this past week. More relaxed. Eleanor did not take the restraining order quietly. She immediately hired a lawyer, a shark of an attorney named Richard Pemberton, who specialized in grandparents' rights cases. Within 10 days, I was served with papers. Eleanor was suing for court-ordered visitation and claiming that I was mentally unstable, financially incompetent, and deliberately alienating Leo from his grandmother, who had been a consistent and loving presence in his life. The lies in her petition were breathtaking. She claimed she had been providing not just financial support, but the majority of Leo's care. She claimed I had a history of mental health issues, substance abuse, and erratic behavior. She had somehow obtained statements from people I barely knew, neighbors and acquaintances who claimed they were concerned about my parenting. She even had a child psychologist she had paid to review the situation without meeting any of us who opined that cutting off a loving grandparent could be damaging to Leo's development. David was unfazed. This is all smoke and mirrors, he told me. She is trying to overwhelm you with volume. But we have facts on our side. The medical evidence alone is damning, and we are going to dismantle her case piece by piece. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks away. In the meantime, life became a strange kind of hell. Eleanor began a whisper campaign in our community. I started getting strange looks at the grocery store. Other parents at Leo's preschool seemed awkward around me. I later learned that Eleanor had been calling people, framing herself as a concerned grandmother being cruelly cut off from her beloved grandson by her disturbed daughter. She even sent anonymous letters to the school and to Child Protective Services, claiming that Leo was being neglected and abused in my care. CPS came to my house twice in 2 weeks. Apologetic but required to investigate. Both times, they found nothing wrong. In fact, the second caseworker took me aside and said quietly, I have seen this before. Keep documenting everything. The truth will come out. But the stress was crushing. My freelance work suffered because I could not concentrate. My savings were dwindling fast because I had to pay David's retainer. Leo was having nightmares, crying out for me in his sleep. I felt like we were under Siga. And in a way, we were. Then something happened that I had not anticipated. Eleanor showed up at Leo's preschool. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about a week before our court date. I got a panicked call from Mrs. Morrison. Sarah, you need to come right now. Your mother is here. She is demanding to see Leo, and she has a man with her. I think it might be her lawyer. I was across town at a client meeting, but I told them I had an emergency and I drove like a maniac to the preschool. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Eleanor standing near the entrance with a man in an expensive suit. She saw me, and her face twisted into a grotesque smile. I parked and practically ran to the entrance. Mrs. Morrison was standing in the doorway, physically blocking Eleanor and her lawyer from entering. Leo was visible through the window, playing inside with another teacher, thankfully oblivious to the drama outside. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "You have a restraining order. You are not allowed within 500 feet of this school. She is in violation of a court order," David said, suddenly appearing beside me. I had called him on my way, and he must have been nearby. Eleanor's lawyer, Pemberton, stepped forward. "My client has every right to see her grandson. She is contesting the validity of that restraining order, and until a judge rules otherwise, the restraining order is currently in effect." David interrupted. "Your client is in contempt of court. I suggest she leave immediately, or I will call the police." "Go ahead," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Call them. Let them see what kind of mother keeps her child hidden away from his loving grandmother. Let them see how paranoid and controlling you are." Sarah. It was such a transparent manipulation, but I could see it working. A few other parents picking up their kids had stopped to watch the scene. They were hearing Eleanor's words, seeing her play the victim. This was exactly what she wanted. A public spectacle that made me look unreasonable. David pulled out his phone. "I am calling the police now. Mrs. Morrison, can you confirm that you have signage posted indicating this is school property and that Ms. Eleanor Morrison has been informed she is not welcome here? I have it all documented." "Mrs. Morrison said firmly. "I informed Miss N. Morrison last week in writing that she is not authorized to be on school property due to the court order." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, and for just a second, I saw the real fury beneath her performance. Then she turned her attention to the window where Leo was playing. She tapped on the glass and waved. Leo looked up, saw her, and his face crumpled. He started crying and ran to the back of the classroom. That image, my son's terror, burned itself into my brain. "Look what you have done to him," I said to Eleanor, my voice shaking. "Look at how scared he is of you. He is scared because you have poisoned him against me," she hissed, the mask slipping. "You have turned my own grandson into a frightened little mouse who cannot even greet his grandmother properly. You hit him with a shoe," I said loudly, making sure the other parents could hear. "You assaulted a 5-year-old child because he asked you to stop yelling. That is why there is a restraining order. That is why he is afraid of you." Eleanor's face went white, then red. Pemberton grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away, but she shook him off. "You are going to regret this," she said to me, her voice low and venomous. "When the court hears the truth about you, when everyone knows what kind of mother you really are, you will lose everything." The police arrived then, 2 officers who took statements from everyone. Eleanor and Pemberton left before they could be formally charged with violating the restraining order. But David made sure everything was documented. The incident report would be added to our evidence for the hearing. That night, after I finally got Leo home and calmed down, I held him while he cried himself to sleep. He kept asking me why Grandma Eleanor was so angry, why she wanted to hurt us. I did not have good answers. How do you explain malignant narcissism to a kindergartner? The hearing was held on a cold November morning in family court. David had prepared me extensively, but nothing could have fully prepared me for seeing Eleanor walk into that courtroom looking like the picture of wounded dignity. She wore a tasteful navy suit, minimal makeup, her hair styled simply. She looked like everyone's ideal grandmother, warm and concerned. It was a masterful performance. Judge Patricia Holbrook presided. A woman in her late 50s with a reputation for no-nonsense fairness, she looked over the case files with a furrowed brow, clearly troubled by the accusations flying from both sides. Pemberton made his opening statement, painting a picture of Eleanor as a devoted grandmother who had been instrumental in raising Leo, providing financial and emotional support, only to be suddenly and cruelly cut off by an unstable daughter who resented her mother's success. He glossed over the shoe incident, framing it as a momentary loss of temper, after being provoked by Sarah's irrational behavior and subsequent exaggeration by a vindictive daughter. David's response was surgical. He methodically laid out the evidence, the medical documentation of Leo's injury, the statements from Mrs. Nedias Morrison about Eleanor's inappropriate behavior at school, the timeline of Eleanor's escalating control and manipulation, the recording. David had suggested, back when this all started, that I might want to document any interactions with Eleanor if she contacted me. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record conversations without Eleanor's knowledge. I had not thought I would need it, because she was under a restraining order. But Eleanor had called me twice in the week before the hearing, leaving long, rambling voicemails that ranged from accusations to threats to pleading. In one particularly damning message, she said, "You think you can keep Leo from me? I will destroy you. Sarah, I will make sure everyone knows what a failure you are as a mother. I will take that boy away from you, and you will never see him again. And he will thank me for it when he is older and realizes I saved him from your weakness." When David played that recording in court, the effect was electric. Eleanor's face went ashen. Pemberton tried to object, tried to claim the recording was taken out of context. But Judge Holbrook held up a hand. "I have heard enough," she said. She looked at Eleanor with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Ms. Morrison, you hit a 5-year-old child with your shoe." "It was a tap," Eleanor said, her voice tight. "I barely touched him. He was being disrespectful, and his mother was not correcting him. So you struck a child in anger," Judge Holbrook said flatly. "That is assault. And based on this recording and the testimony I have heard today, it is clear to me that you have engaged in a pattern of controlling, manipulative, and aggressive behavior toward both your daughter and your grandson." She turned to me. "Ms. Reynolds, I am denying the petitioner's request for visitation in its entirety. The restraining order will remain in effect. Furthermore, I am ordering Miss Eleanor Morrison to attend parenting and anger management courses before any future petition can even be considered, which I strongly advise her not to file." Eleanor stood up, shaking. "You cannot do this. He is my grandson. I have rights." "You have no rights when you abuse children," Judge Holbrook said coldly. "This hearing is adjourned." The courtroom was silent as Eleanor and Pemberton left. I sat there, trembling, barely able to process what had just happened. David squeezed my shoulder. "You won," he said quietly. "It is over." But it was not over. Not really. The legal battle might have ended, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. Word spread quickly in our small community. The court records were public, and people talk. Suddenly, those who had been whispering about me behind my back were falling over themselves to express support. It was jarring and a bit hypocritical, but I tried to focus on moving forward. Eleanor disappeared from public life. The charity organizations she had been so prominent in quietly removed her from their boards. Her friends, those country club ladies who had hung on her every word, stopped returning her calls. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had become a recluse, bitter and angry, blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. I had won the battle, but the cost had been everything I once believed about family, about mothers, about the possibility of redemption. Leo slowly returned to his normal self, but he had nightmares for months. We started seeing a child therapist, Dr. Amanda Richardson, who specialized in trauma. She helped Leo process what had happened, teaching him that the abuse was not his fault, that he was safe now. She also worked with me, helping me understand the depth of the psychological damage Eleanor had inflicted over the years. Not just on Leo, but on me as well. "You were raised by a narcissist, Dr. Richardson told me during one of our sessions. Everything you described, the constant criticism, the conditional love, the financial manipulation, the inability to see you as a separate person with your own needs and rights. These are all classic patterns. You have been in survival mode your entire life, trying to earn love from someone who is fundamentally incapable of providing it." It was hard to hear, but it was also strangely liberating. I was not crazy. I was not weak. I was not the problem. I was a survivor of emotional abuse. And I was finally breaking free. About 3 months after the hearing, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Eleanor's next-door neighbor, a woman named Margaret. I had met a few times over the years. She wrote that she was concerned about Eleanor, who had become increasingly isolated and seemed unwell. Margaret felt terrible about what had happened and wondered if I might consider talking to my mother. Not to reconcile exactly, but to provide some closure, I showed the email to Dr. Richardson. "What do you think?" I asked. She considered carefully. "That depends. Do you want closure? Do you think she is capable of giving it to you?" "I do not know," I admitted. Part of me wants to hear her say she is sorry, that she understands what she did was wrong. But I know that is probably never going to happen. Then the question is, what do you need for yourself? Not for her. For you. I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I decided to go see Eleanor, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to say what I had never been able to say before. I needed to look her in the eye and tell her the truth without fear of her retaliation. I drove to her house on a gray afternoon in February. The house where I had grown up looked different, smaller somehow. The garden that Eleanor had always kept immaculate was overgrown. The paint on the shutters was peeling. It looked like a place that had been forgotten. Eleanor was sitting on the front porch when I pulled up, bundled in a thick coat despite the covered area. She looked older than I remembered. Thinner, her hair showing gray roots where her usual salon color had grown out. When she saw me, her face did something complicated. A mix of hope and fear and anger. I did not get out of the car immediately. I sat there, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel, giving myself one last chance to drive away. Then I remembered Leo. The way he had looked at me after the court hearing. The way he had said, "You protected me. Mommy, you are brave." So I got out of the car. Eleanor stood up as I approached. "Sarah," she said, and her voice cracked slightly. "I knew you would come back. I knew you would." "I am not here to come back," I interrupted. "I am here to tell you something. And then I am going to leave. And we are never going to see each other again." Her face hardened. "So you are here to gloat, to rub my face in your victory." "No," I said. "I am here because I deserve to say this to you, and you deserve to hear it. Even though I know you will not really understand." I took a breath, steadying myself. "You destroyed any chance we had at a real relationship. Not when you hit Leo. That was just the final straw. You destroyed it when I was a child, and you made me believe that love was something I had to earn through perfection. You destroyed it every time you criticized me, controlled me, manipulated me into believing I was worthless without your approval. You destroyed it when you used your money as a weapon to keep me dependent and grateful. You destroyed it when you tried to do the same thing to my son." Eleanor's face was white. "I did everything for you. I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities I never had. You sacrificed nothing," I said quietly. "You invested in me like I was a project. A reflection of you. Something you could control and display. You never saw me as a person. You never loved me. You loved the idea of what I could do for your image. Your ego. That is not true," she said, but her voice wavered. "I am your mother." "Yeah. You are the woman who gave birth to me," I corrected. "But you were never really my mother. A mother protects her children. A mother helps them grow into their own person. A mother loves them unconditionally. You did none of those things." Tears were running down Eleanor's face now, but they did not move me the way they once would have. I had seen her cry before, had seen her use tears as manipulation. "I do not need you to change," I continued. "I do not need you to apologize or admit what you did. I just need you to know that I see you clearly now, and I am not afraid of you anymore. You cannot hurt me or my son ever again. And that power you thought you had over me, it is gone. It was always an illusion, maintained only by my own fear." Eleanor sat down heavily on the porch steps. Then she looked up at me with something that might have been genuine confusion. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "That is the point. I do not want anything from you. I do not need anything from you. I am going to build a life for Leo and me. And it will be a good life. A life without fear, without walking on eggshells, without constantly bracing for your next criticism. And you are not going to be part of it." I turned to walk back to my car. Behind me, I heard Eleanor say, "You will regret this. Leo will grow up hating you for keeping him from his family." I stopped and looked back at her. If Leo grows up to hate me, it will be because I made actual mistakes as a parent. not because I protected him from abuse. And unlike you, I will take responsibility for those mistakes, learn from them, and do better. That is what real parents do. I drove away without looking back. In my rearview mirror, I saw Eleanor still sitting on those porch steps, a small figure in an overgrown garden, alone with the consequences of her choices. The months that followed were both harder and easier than I expected. Money was still tight, tighter, even without Eleanor's financial support. But I found I could manage. I took on more clients, raised my rates, and discovered that I was actually pretty good at my job when I was not constantly anxious and second-guessing myself. I even hired a part-time babysitter, a sweet college student named Jenna who Leo adored, which gave me more flexibility to work. Leo thrived. It was like watching a flower unfold in the sunshine. He became more confident, more outgoing. His teacher reported that he was excelling in school, making friends easily, participating in class discussions. The nightmares became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. I also started building a life outside of work and parenting. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during the Eleanor years. I joined a single-parent support group that met twice a month. I even started dating. Nothing serious. Just coffee here and there, remembering what it felt like to be seen as Sarah. Not just Sarah the struggling single mother or Sarah the disappointment daughter. 6 months after my confrontation with Eleanor, I got an invitation that surprised me. The elementary school Leo would be attending in the fall was hosting a parent education night on family values and respect. The PTA president, a woman named Jennifer Martinez, whose daughter had been in Leo's preschool class, called to ask if I would consider being a speaker. "We have heard your story," she said gently. "Not all the details, but enough to know that you made very difficult choices to protect your son. I think a lot of parents struggle with toxic family members, and they do not know how to set boundaries without feeling guilty. Would you be willing to share your experience?" My first instinct was to say no. I did not want to be defined by my trauma. I did not want to be the poster child for dysfunctional family relationships. But then I thought about all those nights I had spent Googling how to deal with a toxic mother, or am I wrong to protect my child from his grandmother? Desperately seeking validation that I was not crazy, that my instincts were right. If sharing my story could help even one other parent feel less alone, less crazy, less guilty about choosing their child's well-being over family obligation, then maybe it was worth it. I said yes. The event was held on a warm spring evening in late April. The school auditorium was more crowded than I expected, maybe 150 parents filling the rows of seats. I sat on the stage with 3 other speakers, my hands trembling slightly as I waited for my turn. When Jennifer introduced me, I stood up and walked to the podium. I looked out at all those faces, and for a second, I felt frozen. Then I saw Leo sitting in the front row with Jenna. He gave me a big thumbs up and a grin. And suddenly I knew I could do this. "Good evening," I began. "My name is Sarah Reynolds, and I am here to talk about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I am here to talk about the difference between respect and fear, and why it is sometimes necessary to protect your children from people you once believed you had to tolerate simply because they were family." I told them my story. Not all of it. Not the most painful, intimate details. But enough. I told them about growing up with a mother who wielded love like a weapon, who used money and obligation to maintain control. I told them about watching the same patterns start to emerge with my son, and the terrible moment when I realized that family loyalty can sometimes be a form of betrayal when the family member in question is harmful. "The respect we owe our elders," I said, "is not the same as blind obedience or tolerating abuse. Teaching our children to respect adults does not mean teaching them that adults can never be wrong or harmful. It means teaching them that respect is mutual, that it must be earned and maintained through behavior, and that everyone, including children, has the right to boundaries and safety." I talked about the guilt, the fear, the social pressure to keep the family together at any cost. I talked about the moment I chose my child's well-being over my mother's demands, and how terrifying and liberating that choice had been. "Some of you might be in similar situations," I continued. "Maybe not as dramatic, maybe not involving physical harm, but situations where a family member makes you feel small, controlled, or afraid. Situations where your children are learning to walk on eggshells or suppress themselves to avoid criticism. I want you to know that choosing to limit or end contact with that person does not make you a bad person or a bad child. It makes you a good parent. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, and then the applause started. Several people were crying. After the event, at least a dozen parents came up to me, some to share their own stories, others to thank me for giving them permission to prioritize their children's emotional safety over family obligation. But the moment that mattered most came from an unexpected source. As the crowd was thinning out, I noticed a figure standing at the back of the auditorium, partially hidden by shadow. My heart stopped for a second, thinking it might be Eleanor. But as the person stepped forward into the light, I saw it was not her. It was a woman about Eleanor's age, well-dressed, but with tired eyes. She approached me hesitantly. "Ms. Reynolds, my name is Patricia Harmon. I am Eleanor Morrison's neighbor." I recognized the name. This was Margaret's friend, one of the country club ladies who had been part of Eleanor's social circle. I braced myself for an attack or criticism, but instead, Patricia said quietly, "I came tonight because I heard you were speaking, and I wanted to say something. I was one of Eleanor's friends for over 20 years. I was also one of the people who believed her version of events when you cut her off. I thought you were being cruel and unreasonable." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. But then I watched what happened to her after the court case. I watched her blame everyone but herself. I watched her become bitter and vengeful, and I started remembering things I had overlooked before. The way she talked about you, always with this undercurrent of contempt. The way she controlled every conversation, every social situation. The way she treated service staff at the club. I realized that I had been afraid of her too. In small ways. Afraid of her judgment and disapproval. She looked at me directly. "I am so sorry I did not see it sooner. I am sorry I did not support you when you needed it. What you did? Protecting your son, even though it meant losing your mother and facing social judgment. That took incredible courage. I just wanted you to know that some of us understand now. Some of us see what you sacrificed." "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Patricia nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it is worth, Eleanor is miserable, completely isolated. She refuses to acknowledge any responsibility, and as a result, she has pushed away everyone who ever cared about her. I thought that might give you some sense of justice." I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "It does not. Not really. I do not want her to be miserable. I just want her to be out of our lives. But thank you for telling me." After the event, I took Leo home, gave him his bath, and read him his bedtime story. As I was tucking him in, he looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Mommy, are you sad about Grandma Eleanor?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "Sometimes I am sad." I told him honestly, "I am sad that she was not able to be the kind of grandmother you deserved. But I am not sad about the choice I made to protect you. That choice was easy because I love you more than anything in the world. I love you too, Mommy," he said, hugging his stuffed elephant. "And I am glad you are brave. So am I. Baby, so am I." After he fell asleep, I went out to the small patio behind our townhouse. It was a clear night, stars visible despite the suburban light pollution. I sat there in the darkness, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had changed. A year ago, I had been trapped, afraid, convinced that I had no options except to endure Eleanor's toxicity because I needed her financial support and because you are supposed to honor your mother no matter what. Now I was free, struggling financially, but free. And Leo was thriving in ways he never could have if I had continued to prioritize family obligation over his well-being. I thought about the other parents at the event who had shared their stories with me, the ones who were still stuck in their own versions of my nightmare. Afraid to set boundaries, afraid to choose themselves and their children over toxic family members. I hoped my story had helped them see that there is a way out, that choosing yourself does not make you selfish, that protecting your child is always the right answer, even when everyone else thinks you are wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Heard your speech was amazing. Proud of you. Friend." I smiled and texted back, Thank you for everything. I could not have done this without you. His response came quickly. You could have. You are stronger than you know. You always were. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had always been strong. But Eleanor's constant criticism and control had convinced me otherwise. Maybe the only thing that had changed was my willingness to believe in my own strength, to trust my own judgment, to value my own worth. The next morning, Leo bounded into my room at dawn, the way he always did on Saturday mornings. Can we go to the park? Mommy, and then can we get ice cream, and then can we visit the library? I laughed and pulled him into bed with me for a cuddle. We can do all of those things. Where do you want to go first? He thought about it seriously. The park. I want to go on the swings and fly really high. Then that is exactly what we will do. We spent the day doing exactly what Leo wanted. No schedule. No obligations. Just a mother and son enjoying their freedom. At the park, I pushed him on the swings, and he laughed with pure joy as he soared higher and higher. His face turned toward the sun. Higher. Mommy, push me higher. I pushed him as high as I dared, and I watched him fly. And I thought about all the ways I was determined to let him soar through life. I would never clip his wings the way Eleanor had tried to clip mine. I would never make him feel that love was conditional or that his worth depended on meeting my impossible standards. I would teach him that he was valuable simply because he existed, that his feelings mattered, that he had the right to say no and to have boundaries. I would break the cycle. I already had. So here is what I learned from my journey through darkness and into light. Family is not an obligation to endure abuse. Family is not a license to treat people with cruelty and then demand forgiveness because of shared DNA. Real family, the kind that matters, is built on respect, trust, kindness, and the willingness to see each other as whole human beings with separate needs and boundaries. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the most loving choice is to say no. Sometimes protecting yourself and your children means accepting that you will be misunderstood, judged, or blamed by people who do not understand or do not want to understand. But here is the truth that I wish I had learned earlier. Your worth is not determined by how much abuse you can endure. Your strength is not measured by how long you can tolerate being diminished. Your value as a person, as a parent, as a human being, does not depend on maintaining relationships that destroy your soul. You deserve respect. Your children deserve safety. And sometimes, the only way to get both is to walk through fire and come out the other side, scarred but free. I chose freedom. I chose my son. And I would make that choice again 1,000 times over, no matter the cost. Because at the end of the day, when Leo wraps his arms around my neck and tells me I am the best mommy in the world, when I see him laughing without fear and dreaming without limits, I know I made the right choice. I saved him from the cycle that almost destroyed me. I gave him something. Eleanor never gave me the unconditional love and acceptance that every child deserves. And that is worth more than all the money, all the social approval, all the family ties in the world. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself or your loved ones? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your experience matters. And maybe by sharing our stories, we can help others find the courage to choose freedom too. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing you are not alone is the first step toward breaking free. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, choosing yourself is not selfish. It is survival.